Memory of Rachel Leah, Bas from Chaim Tzvi. May her neshama have an aliyah. We left off in Siman Yodalid, page 92 in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Mitzuda edition. The laws governing the paragraphs of prayers leading up to the brachas of Shema, beginning with Baruch She'amar and concluding with Yishtabach. In Seif Aleph, Number 1, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch teaches as follows: Min hodu ad la'achar hashira hema psukei dezimra. The section of psukei dezimra begins with hodu, that's following Baruch She'amar, up until the shira of Az Yashir, the song of Az Yashir. The bracha before is Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar hi bracha shelufneihem, v'yishtabach hi bracha shele'achareihem. And yishtabach is the bracha after Psukei Dezimra. One note that is going to be a little bit relevant to some of the laws in this paragraph and in the continuation of the chapter. As we well know, there are several different minhagim, several different customs and nuschos and versions of our traditional davening. Specifically, as is relevant to the discussion at hand, the Nosach Sfard recites Hodu before Baruch She'amar. Therefore, although the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says that from Hodu until after the Shira, the Hema Psukei Dezimra, it's obvious that the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is referring to the Ashkenazic tradition, to the Ashkenazic rite, whereas when it comes to the Sephardic tradition, both the Hasidic, Polish, White Russian, Nosach Sfard, as well as the Eidot Mizrach, and Nosach Sfard, all of whom have the custom of reciting Hodu before Baruch She'amar. So Hodu is only a prelude to Psukei Dezimra and is not part of the actual Psukei Dezimra, and hence it would not lend itself to some of the stringencies and the rules and the regulations that we will learn about. Meaning that's from Baruch She'amar until Yishtabach. Baruch She'amar is the bracha before, Yishtabach is the bracha after. So as the Kitzur now teaches, Mishehischil Baruch She'amar ad la'achar Gemara Tefillah Aser lahafsik b'dibur afilu b'lashon HaKadosh. That once one begins Baruch She'amar, which is a bracha, until after Tefillah, which means until after Shemana Esrei, and certainly would include through the end of Yishtabach, so one is not allowed to speak and interrupt, even if that interruption is in Hebrew. For those who daven Nosach Sfard and recite the Hodu before Baruch She'amar, so again, there's never any reason to just interrupt Psukim for no reason, but if there's a little bit of a reason, there is no prohibition against interrupting in as much as you didn't yet say a bracha. Of course, the Kitzur is following Nosach Ashkenaz, and therefore the prohibition of being mafsik, of speaking, would begin with Baruch She'amar, which includes Hodu. That's the prohibition is even in Hebrew. Would anybody think otherwise? Apparently, yes. You go back in some of the earlier sources, so there is a possibility that Lashon HaKodesh would be permissible. We paskin, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and all other authorities rule that even speaking in Hebrew would be prohibited when a hefsek is not allowed. I do remember growing up, however, I davened in a shtibel with a very choshev Talmid Chacham, a very significant Talmid Chacham, who when he was the Rav, Rabbi Isaacson Zichron Lefracha, the author of the Sefer Vaser Tov, so there were times when he had to interrupt, and as in all the way to the beginning of the shul, sometimes it wouldn't be a tenth for a minyan. So in those cases, as we're going to learn, it is permissible to interrupt for the sake of a mitzvah, but when he would interrupt only in Hebrew. He generally spoke Yiddish, but when he would have to call somebody for a tenth for a minyan, he would do so in Hebrew, even though we paskin that a hefsek is prohibited even in Hebrew, since there are some who say that in Lashon HaKodesh it might be okay, we don't paskin that way, so when it was absolutely necessary to be mafsik, when it's permissible to be mafsik, such as the example that I gave, in order to procure a tenth for a minyan, the Rabbi Isaacson Zichron Levrach would be careful to do so only in Lashon HaKodesh in Hebrew. Strictly speaking, the halacha is that when it's it's prohibited to interrupt, it's always prohibited, and when it's mutter, it is permissible even in lashon, even in a language other than Hebrew. Ach le'inyan hefsek l'dvar mitzvah, continues the Ketzer, although one is generally not allowed to interrupt, but with respect to interrupting for the sake of a mitzvah, so here yesh chiluk ben psukei de zimra u'virchaseha lekriyas shma u'virchaseha. There is a difference between the psukei de zimra as opposed to the brachos of shma and shma. The brachos of shma and shma are significantly more stringent, as we will at some point, God willing, learn. Once one begins the bracha, beginning Yatzeh Or Varechal, so one is not allowed to interrupt, even to answer Amen, even to answer certain parts of the Kedusha. One is only allowed to interrupt during the brachas of Shema and the Shema in order to answer Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah of the Kaddish, the Amen of Damiran Bi Alma Vimru Amen, which is the end of the first half of Kaddish,